Hello to everybody, and welcome to the Tech Talk series, episode 4 of season 1. A short introduction to me and Jeff. And this time it's Jeff's turn to speak out first.
All right, so this is Jeff Kalberg, Principal Technology Evangelist here at IGEL, based
And
in
I'm
Cincinnati. Sorry, go ahead.
That's fine. Too long pause. And I'm Fredrik Brattstig, Tech Evangelist at IGEL. I'm not the principal guy because that's the old man Jeff. I'm based in Sweden. So that's us, and let's go into what we did 3 weeks ago. Shouldn't it be 2 weeks, Jeff?
No, well, it was supposed to be 2 weeks ago, but we had an event last Thursday that kind of usurped our time, so we had to push this off a week. So yes, 3 weeks ago was the last time we met, and 3 weeks ago we started to dig into the Citrix Workspace app and configuring the Workspace app on the end computing device, as I recall.
Yeah. We did a high level overview of the different options, and we'll drill deeper today. And just as a reminder, it was 3 weeks since the last time. It will be 1 week till the next time. So it's all messed up, but that's fine. So for this Tech Talk, we are going to talk about Citrix, and we are going to look at the configuration, and it's part 1 of who knows.
Right. It's kind of part 1 or part 0. Part 1 of 2, or maybe part 1 of 3, because we already had a part 0.
Yeah.
And we work in IT, so we start counting at 0. So this is actually the second part. Why don't we do a quick, if you want to bring up and share your device, we can do a quick look at the configuration on the RX 420 IGEL edition.
Then I will need to figure out how to do the sharing, and I will certainly try to do so. It seems like you have a great desktop.
I do, and I'm looking at an IGEL device.
See a great desktop at least.
So I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and launch IGEL setup on this device if it's not already running.
Of course. Oh, it's the wrong device. Let's see if we can do it like this then.
Perfect.
Running. We were actually on the x86 based, but now we are on the.
Frederick, the first thing I see on here is you're doing something that most of us are not able to do right now. I'm looking at the top line of yours IGEL setup utility, and it says 1101.120 RC1.
Yes.
What is that?
I mean, it's one of the release candidates only for internal currently, but there is a feature inside of this one that we want you to see because it will kind of reflect on what's happening in a week or two, hopefully, for the release of this firmware. So the 1101.120 will be the first public release of the end computing IGEL OS firmware since release or since the start of sales.
That's correct. So it's as we were developing this new operating system, or on this new platform, not an old operating system, but migrating to this new platform, there was a lot of work to be done. So we didn't update the Citrix receiver because we were just getting the Workspace app, because we were just getting it out there. And so one of the things we'll see in this new release is, of course, it's going to have the Workspace app version 2104, which was last year's release or last month's release. I'm not sure if 2105's hit, but it's coming soon, and we'll work to include that in a future, the next release of IGEL OS for the RX 420. Anyway, that's good to know. So let's dig in here. So let's expand sessions here. This is all about Citrix, configuring Citrix, and getting into some more finer detail. We go down inside here. If you expand that Citrix and click on that Citrix client selection piece. So when we looked at this before, we mentioned that, IGEL includes multiple versions of the Workspace app, and you can pick and choose which version of the Workspace app you'd like to run. So the default will always be the most current. In this case, it's defaulted to 2104. Most people will leave it at that, but on occasion, some people like to move back and use an earlier version for some reason. Maybe it's application compatibility, who knows?
Or SDSR selections or whatever it might be.
Correct. So to move on down here, let's go down to the Citrix storefront. One of the other things we covered off was the fact that if you, go ahead.
This is the important piece of the 120.
Oh.
The Workspace app 2104 is baked in.
Is who?
The Workspace app 2104.
Yes.
It hasn't been there since before, and we got a lot of questions about why are we still on 2010.
That's correct. Yeah. So we'll have 2104 out there in, I would say, a few weeks, and
yes,
you should get it automatically as part of the automated update service. So perfect. So we'll default and we'll use 2104. If we go down here to the Citrix storefront section, we'll come back to global. If you go to the storefront section here, just a quick review. One of the things we did is when you click on Citrix storefront, we told you that you needed to define, go ahead and click on Citrix storefront. And then in here, you had to define a method for launching the Citrix Workspace app and connecting to the storefront. So we said you needed to activate put an icon on the desktop or start menu or wherever you'd like to see this. We also talked about defining your storefront or your server connection. So on the left-hand side, where we navigate down to server here, this is where we went in and we went ahead and added a server location or the location of our farm. So we would go ahead and put in the resolvable name of the server, okay, and the path to our store. And I think you told us that yours was IGEL, and then store name we pop in here as well. And we talked about the fact that we could also go in and we could pre-populate the domains that we want to connect to. So we can go ahead and save this, and then underneath it in a window below here.
One important piece before we go further. So we need to point out the native store. A lot of people want to put IGEL Web, but IGEL Web is the web piece of the store. We are connecting to the native store. Okay, that's it.
And if you were connecting to, say, a NetScaler, or I guess an ADC, whatever we're calling it these days, the path to the store is defined inside that appliance, in which case we leave the path to the store and the store name itself. Actually, we would leave those blank. So, but you're internal, so you probably want to hit cancel here to go ahead and, okay. Awesome. And we talked about the fact that you could pre-populate your domains here that you authenticate against. Okay, in which case, if you decide to pre-populate that, when users go to the IGEL login screen, which is a kind of a pre-login before you hit the farm, okay, that would be pre-populated. If that is the only domain that we have, it might be something where we go ahead and just hide this. So on the login screen itself, when it pops up, it'll simply ask you for username and password. We go ahead and take these settings here. If we go to the next section here on the left where it says login, we talked about the fact that IGEL supports different login methods, okay? And we went through these details in episode 3 where we had different kinds of authentication methods, the password authentication method being IGEL's method, but we also have support for IGEL's implementation of smart cards. We have the Citrix authentication mechanism that you can hit, a NetScaler, or if there's multi-factor authentication, those will be exposed as well. Okay, we talked about the fact that if you use the Citrix or the IGEL password authentication method, you have the opportunity, okay, to store user credentials. So you could actually put in a username, maybe a generic username, and you could configure that name and that password, okay, and the domain that they're connecting to. Of course, that's set by default, but we could enter that information, and what will happen here is we launch the session, it would go ahead and log in without us having to be prompted to type. So we might leave this here, Frederick, because we're probably going to log in later and you won't want to have to enter that. It's up to you. So yeah. We talked about the fact that you can control And then it's options below here about how we can tie the user's login credentials to the screensaver locally. So when the IGEL screensaver kicks in, the password for the screensaver has been synchronized with the domain password. We talked about the fact that if we have a single application, a resource defined to a user, well, there's no sense stopping at the desktop to say, click here from my desktop, stop at the IGEL desktop, okay, to launch an application desktop or an application itself. If we only have one resource, that would start automatically. And we talked about the fact that we could maintain a list of applications or resources that we want to launch automatically. And this isn't limited to just one. You could have 2 or 3 or 4 different applications that would launch, in sequence or concurrently. So it's important that we talked about that. And then we also talked about under appearance on the left-hand side.
Just clean up. Yep.
All right. We talked about the fact that we provide tools for filtering all of the resources that come back and either placing them on the desktop, placing them down there in the start menu, in the quick launch area, in essence, allowing you to completely control, what it is that someone would want to see on their desktop. And that's kind of an important piece as well. And then additionally, we then went ahead and talked a little bit about the Citrix Works self-service function, which is on the left-hand side. And we talked about, at least on the Linux side, we really, in all of our years of experience working with IGEL, which is now, approaching 3 decades at this point, I suppose, of IGEL between us, I haven't seen a lot of people use self-service on a thin client or on an endpoint device like what IGEL OS gives us. So, but we can do that. We talked about the Workspace Hub and the fact that you can enable that as well. So we went through all those pieces. You can go back and look at episode 3, and we go into the details of the Workspace Hub and what we do there. All right. But let's kind of go back to a few items here underneath the Citrix storefront that we didn't talk about last time. So under Citrix storefront, we talked about the reconnect feature. So when you click on reconnect, if you disconnect from your session, what kind of behavior do you want to see happen on the remote system or on the host that you connected to? So the question is, do I just want to disconnect the sessions? Or do I want to, when I reconnect, do I want to connect disconnected sessions? Do I want to prompt the user, say, do you want to reconnect? I mean, basically we allow users to pick and choose how sessions should be reconnected when they if they've been disconnected previously. Am I getting this out right, Frederick?
Yeah.
I've connected myself so many times, I don't know what I'm saying. Anyway, so that's a nice feature. There's other features here for the various, for the reconnection options. If I want to go ahead and reconnect, I can give a reconnected session name, so I can click on that, and launch that as well. So a lot of interesting reconnect features. There's also a refresh feature on the left. So what happens, and this is something that we don't see used very much, but on the refresh side of things, essentially what happens is an administrator of an environment, we may say, hey, I'm going to give this user, maybe I give Frederick a new application, right? When Frederick wants to have that application, his choices might be to go ahead and log off and log back in to get all of his new resources. What the refresh option does is it makes a reconnection to the storefront and enumerates the new resources that have been given to Frederick, so they'll pop up on his desktop without having to log off and log back in. It's a nice little feature when it's needed. So, and then the log off, obviously when you're done working, you need to log off of the storefront, and we provide a log off option here. If you go back and look at episode 3, when Frederick made a connection, we put a log off icon up on the desktop. That's there when we're done working, we could go ahead and click on that, and that will disconnect the user from the storefront and clear out all of the applications that have been provided to the IGEL device but for that particular user. There is, speaking of logging off, and just a quick aside here, one of the questions is, of course, if I walk away and I forget to log off, or is there a way to automate this process? Okay, and in fact, down in our system section on the left-hand side, and we'll do this for the video, we go back in here, we can go down to firmware customization. Underneath here, we have a custom commands, and then we have this thing called post session. If we go in here and we say, hey, when I finish working with Citrix, okay, so when my last Citrix session ends, because I've logged off, I've disconnected, or whatever the case may be, what would I like to have happen? Okay, in this case, okay, we may just want to log off the user, okay, to make the system fresh for the next user. And so this is really a good practice. Know that this is here. If and when this need arises, there is a way to have the user's system automatically log off when they're done working. So, am I missing anything on just the session itself?
No, I think it's good.
Deeper dive section of actually,
I think it's good.
yeah. So I know one of the things that people are always interested in. Go ahead.
No, it's a bit delay between me and you, so. It's a bit delay between me and you.
Sorry. We need a faster network. Okay, so let's talk a little bit in more detail about the global settings for Citrix. Okay. In here, we have a section called Storefront Login. We said it last time, we'll say it again. This is just a mirror of the login section under the storefront. We've got to remember to ask development what they were meaning to do here. We think it might have just been a mistake to have it in two places. So whatever, just know that.
It does apply to the self-service.
What's that?
It does apply to the self-service.
Well, that would be true there too. So, all right, well, back here, probably the most important piece that I think people ask about are things like multimedia and codecs. So let's pop down to this HDX multimedia and talk about what settings are here and what they mean. So down.
Where did we want to go? Sorry.
HDX multimedia. Yeah. So kind of important, multimedia redirection. So when we go play a video remotely, a YouTube or some other kind of video remotely, we want that media content to redirect, okay, to the local device and be rendered, be decoded locally as opposed to being decoded in the server. And we have this setting on by default, so it's not something that somebody has to go in and implement. But one of the pieces that's not on by default is this webcam optimization. We call it webcam redirection.
Jeff, a small correction. Specifically, YouTube will not play using multimedia redirection. But if you play Windows media, then it will be redirected. If you have the setup, of course, on the backend. For YouTube, we need to browse the content redirection.
Oh, well, good point. So I'm glad you brought that up. See, now that just shows you I don't spend any time in YouTube. So I wouldn't have known those things. So, and then the webcam, you know, a lot of times people ask us about USB redirection because they want to get a webcam redirected. And we did a little session early this year at our Disrupt where we talked about USB redirection and why it's not good. Because we really want to, USB devices, there are some USB redirection, but USB redirection is simply a very long extension cord. You know, whereas like a webcam optimization is more of a client server or agent host kind of application where the webcam media, the webcam content is getting handled separately using special encoders and decoders, if you will. So by enabling this, we actually turn that optimization for webcams on in the Citrix environment. And quite often, I think we had to tune these settings to the kind of webcams you had. And if those weren't done properly, it was, well, sometimes the webcams simply wouldn't work because you might have a frame rate that's beyond what the webcam's capable of, or some kind of resolution the webcam can't do, or whatever. Just lots of different options here.
Who knows the
one of the new
webcam delay type? I have no idea.
Yeah. Heck, I don't know. What's it say? There was a tip there to tell us anything? I mean, now that we have the option, one delay for remaining time, I have no idea.
So that's why
that
the
when you're
automatic
distracting the webcam?
HTX is so much better.
Yes, I mean, now that we have that, this is kind of all we do. So, and this is a new feature. The first time we've seen it really has been this. It's new in the last 6 months, but this ability to go in and say, let's let the system interrogate the webcam, see what it's capable of doing, okay, and then using the best combination for the kind of performance you want from the webcam. So if we go very low, it'd be a very, it'll be consistent, I suppose, and quick and high frame rate. We always talk about you can have lots of frame rates, but not very high resolution, or you can have very high resolution and very and low frame rates. If you want the nice combination, normal might be the way to go. But you can pick and choose whatever works best for you, right? So, and that makes the webcam available in applications. The browser content redirection, important piece. We don't have that on by default, but when it's on, you need to configure it on the back end, I recall, right, Frederick? On
Yes.
the Citrix side?
There is a lot of policies you need to set, and you need to, you cannot say whitelist anymore, but the same wording for all the web addresses that you want to have the browser content redirection to kick in on. And what happens is when you open up your web browser on server side in your session, the content of the web browser will be rendered on the local device and projected back to the Citrix environment.
Perfect. So, browser content redirection. Codec. Very important piece here that we like to talk about. So, when we look at an IGEL device today, okay, one of the important pieces that we need to make sure that we've done is we've gone ahead and configured the accelerated H.264 deep compression codec. Of course, having using an accelerated codec requires that your hardware support it. So, the RX 420 does support the deep compression codec locally, so we do get accelerated graphics. One of the important pieces for people to understand is that the H.264 codec is a licensed product. So, we want to make sure that you have a valid license. Okay, I mean, during the demo period, you have this license, but if you have a demo license, after 90 days, that demo license expires. Okay, and then you will not have this codec. The system will continue to run, but your performance is going to go down pretty dramatically at times. So, but we want to be able to turn that on. There's a couple of other options here around this, text tracking and small frame features. And you've always told me, I think we should be turning those off. And why is that?
So it depends a bit on what, I mean, in my book at least, when I use H.264, I want to have generally I want to have the full screen to be accelerated and encoded on the back end and decoded on the front end. If you add text tracking and small frames, it's more of if you have some parts of the screen that are moving images and some parts that are, so to speak, still images. Text tracking is kind of like figuring out where there is text on the image, and it will bring the text in a slightly better readable format for the user in terms of the graphics quality. So it depends a bit on the use case, what you want to do in terms of which kind of session type you have. My recommendation when you do H.264 deep compression and a lot of moving images, like maybe you see on the screen that I'm showing in my webcam, there is a video playing and the whole screen is changing all the time. Then of course, text tracking and small frame features are not really used. So it depends a bit. Test what's best in your environment.
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the other things is I've learned from you as our graphics guru, is the fact that not all hardware acceleration is the same, depending on the brand and the component and the I don't want to say the quality, but the say a premium grade versus a normal grade kind of GPU for graphics decoding can give you different results. So there are a few, on the Intel side, there are a few tools and stuff to be able to go in and decode and figure out what your processor is capable of doing. So I'm gonna throw you out here. I just added a link here in the chat that goes to a blog post that Frederick just put up there on accelerated graphics. Okay, it's talking about our UD7, but the important parts are not the UD. I mean, the UD7 is kind of important, but when it comes to graphics, it's that GPU, that media processor, that makes the difference. And there are some videos that are out there of the RX 420 running graphics that just blow me away in terms of the quality and the high-end performance of what we can do with that little box. So that link can be useful for those that are interested in finding out what their machines are capable of doing. So
one thing to mention on this topic. The Raspberry Pi 4 has a limitation of full HD for hardware acceleration. If you want to use a resolution that is higher than full HD, so 1920 times 1080, then you will need to switch to software, so turn off hardware accelerated graphics. The Pi actually can do, from my understanding, H.265 in 4K. But it's the chicken and the egg thing, because the Workspace app doesn't support H.265 on the Linux side. So eventually someday we will have it.
Good point. Good point. All right, other items of importance in here. We'll do a quick review of native USB redirection. Obviously, if you want to use USB redirection, you have to turn it on. So we would direct you to this native USB redirection, and you would click on that box. And when you do that, okay, we start out with a couple of important points here. This is the default rule, okay? And that's more or less in the absence of any rules, this is what we're going to do. So we're going to deny USB devices that are plugged in. Now, I will keep in mind that some HID devices, like your keyboard and your mouse and wireless dongles, we've got policies already set on the IGEL side, so that you don't have to worry about redirecting those. You have to be pretty absolute if you want to redirect a wireless. Well, I don't know why you would, but if you want to redirect a network connection, there is one use case when you would, but I'll save that for another day. So generally, you're going to have a deny in here, because then you can go in and set various rules either on the class level. So we can hit a plus sign to say I want to redirect, and then we can hit kind of the drop down for the various kinds of devices that we might want to redirect. And I don't know. We keep adding options in here. Maybe we go with some of these, like hub devices. CDC, good Lord.
So basically, in my book, you want to have control of what you actually do redirect. So I rarely use the class rules. I basically always use the device rules. So let's look at the device rules.
So to pick up on that, if I had a specific, if I on IT said, I want to go out and I want to buy this particular, I don't know, some kind of scanner that we want to redirect into the backend environment. And we say, okay, we are approving this scanner. This is the scanner we support. We've tested it. They could go in and put in a very specific rule, okay, for that vendor and product ID.
Did you disappear, Jeff?
You're looking at something you want to redirect. Yeah.
Exactly. So
The options.
easy enough to get the vendor ID and the product ID that you are asked for on device rules. You simply just open up a terminal, type ls USB, and it will list all your USB devices. And then you just pick the vendor ID and the product ID and type it into this box. And after you hit apply and connect to a Citrix session, this device will be redirected to the Citrix session using USB redirection.
Perfect. I think in the past you had some joystick controllers that you might have done this with.
Yep.
Do some of your aviation flying stuff that you do. So the use cases are here. Our recommendation is to use vendor ID, product ID. There are class rules. Whatever you do here, okay, you also have policies on the Citrix side to allow devices as well. So on occasion, on the policy side, we might control all redirection and maybe allow everything on this end. It's just really a choice, but know that you have to activate USB redirection to use it. The other thing that we want to take a quick look at is the mapping features. If you want to go up to mapping real quick. And we're talking here about drive mapping and the old COM port mapping for still those COM devices that are still out there that will never go away, it seems, printer mapping. Now these bits and pieces are on, but they still need to be defined. Okay, so it isn't really, while the options are here, drive mapping is going to give you access to local storage, but you only get access to local storage if you enable local storage, which you can do in the IGEL side in the devices section. A little further down in our setup. It's also where your printers, you can define printer mapping, but there's nothing there until you add printers. So if I wanted to add a printer, we can go down to devices, we can go to printers, and I can come in and I can add a printer here. And adding a printer on the IGEL side isn't just about a locally attached printer, but we do support that. When you find that device out there that still supports a parallel port, you can use that. But you can also define network printers and LPR printers and IPP printers and basically all these printers you can define, and you can pick and choose the manufacturer and what driver to use locally. And then in the end, we can go in and we say, okay, I want to make this printer available in my ICA sessions. And I want to tell Citrix, I want to tell the server environment what driver I would like to use on the remoted side, okay, to send the print data stream down. So you could send, this is an interesting little exercise, you could send, PCL down and print it out as PDF, and we'll do the print data transform locally in the IGEL device. It's kind of interesting. So define printers here. It's under the storage devices. You go down to storage devices there briefly. Under storage hot plug, if you wanted to use a storage device, you have to enable the feature. Okay, so now you can actually have a storage devices here, but you have to turn it on to be able to use it. So back up on the Citrix side, we talked about mapping. I think one of the other items here might be options. So we go under options here. Okay, these are a lot of legacy pieces here. Okay, so like things like server redraw and disabling Windows alerts, some of these, the backing store, this is technology that goes back to how X works and how layering of Windows works. And this goes back to 2000, 2003 with Citrix in terms of, and Linux and X, where some of these features come in. These are pretty well handled anymore, so people don't need to go tweak these items. But I think the bottom half of the screen here, the audio bandwidth limit, and then the gateway border CGP address, and some of these other pieces here, and especially the adaptive transport. That's always an interesting item here because, as you've said, we almost recommend that you set the adaptive transport to TCP only unless you have it properly configured on the back end. Otherwise, you can encounter very lengthy times to log in. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, it will try to handshake, try to do the UDP traffic. If it fails, it will fall back to TCP, but you will add a 10 to 15 seconds to the login time. So instead of having the user to sit and wait and see the ping pong thing walking across the screen, it just goes like. So if you happen to have that issue, that it's taking a lot of time to log in before the session kicks off, test to do TCP only, and you will see a new world.
Right. And of course, if you do want to use the UDP, well, then go in and set it up.
Of course.
So when it does test, it doesn't spend time waiting to fall back. I think the other thing, and we're going to run out of time here, but there's one other item we wanted to cover off in this session, and that is the Windows section. On the left-hand side under Window, this is where we talked about this in the last session a little bit. This is where you can go and expand, to the session to cover all screens. You can say, I want to put the session on a specific screen if I want to. There's the Citrix connection bar that sits at the top of the screen that'll hide or you can pull down. This is where you can turn that on. It's where you can decide whether or not I want icons to pop into the IGEL system tray. Then this is also where we have this screen pinning feature, which is relatively new. And the screen pinning allows me to take different aspects of my connection, different sessions, and launch them on different monitors. So for example, I might come in and put my desktop, and say I want that to be on the first or second monitor, or more interestingly, I could say, hey, I want my monitor. If we could go in and we can pick and choose, instead of expanding all monitors or just a specific monitor, I can say, hey, I want to choose the monitors. So if my screens are laid out in a 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of format, or 1, 2, 3, 4, I could say I want my full desktop to be on screens 1 and 2. So when I look at Citrix's or Frederick's setup in his screen there, I would have my session across the bottom 2 screens, and then I might put something different in the top 2 screens. So it's a cool feature allowing you to predefine that configuration of where applications and desktops are going to run on your desktop. I wonder what would happen if you kind of did them diagonally. I'm not sure that would work very well. Be interesting. We'll have to test that one day.
Yeah. I mean, for the Pi, we have 2 screens. That's the maximum amount. So on the Pi, it's fairly simple. But on the UD7, for instance, we have four screens. Then it might be of interest, of course.
So anyway, we are running out of time here, but I will offer this. It's kind of a closing comment. We thought that in the next session, there are some very, very advanced configuration functions built into the Workspace app that are accessible on the IGEL device. And we thought what we would do in our next session is go deeper yet into the finer points of configuring Citrix on the RX 420. So in a week, since it's only a week away, we'll do that the next time. Meanwhile, we are going to issue an update, And if you, in the IGEL setup, if you pop down here under System, Frederick, under System, under Update, Firmware Update, this is where we define where your device is going to update its firmware. If there's no definition here, okay, and you haven't done anything to make it more automatic, when you boot your device, when we post this new firmware, okay, you will get a message on your screen that says there's new firmware. Do you want to install it? Okay, if you say yes, it'll go ahead and download and put the new firmware on your device. If you brought this device under management and you have defined update parameters for this, that's fine, but know that the automatic update won't work, and you'll need to perform the updates yourself. Okay. If you want to go back to the automatic update, just remove any kind of configuration for the update from the device. Okay, and it'll reach out and update automatically. Okay. So it's kind of a nice little feature there. And if you wanted to extend the automatic update feature, maybe we can talk about that in a future session and talk about the options that are there. So
sounds like a good idea.
Anything else we want to cover?
No, I think, I mean, we are 12 minutes over time, so I think we should stop here and have everybody to join us in a week.
Well, but we have a question. And
we do.
The answer is yes.
The answer is yes, and
we're talking about an idle time melt.
Exactly.
You want to go through that real quick, where that's done?
Sure. Can an idle session timeout be built to automatically log out of the Citrix workspace app after X amount of time? There is nothing on the Citrix server side to do that. I would say certainly
so what
yes.
We have, yes, and a quick review of that. We actually have this documented in the IGEL knowledge base, but where you would want to focus on this is in the screensaver configuration. So if we were to go into under the user interface, we go down to the screen lock screensaver. Okay, which, by the way, if you go to options, the screensaver kicks in by default after 5 minutes. Okay, which that's extendable. Okay, but go ahead here, because it's in here where we can set a countdown duration and then an action after that countdown, which can be, for example, screensaver might kick in and then there'll be a secondary countdown that will log us off. But because we have some items configured here through profiles, we have no access to it right now.
Correct.
Why don't we, I got an idea.
It is a lengthy activity, so I think we should actually save that for the next or the upcoming session.
I was going to say, let's do that. I like that idea.
Because Ben and Ryan that has asked the question might be online again because he has left us.
Yeah. Okay. And we could also track down his email address and send him the link in the knowledge base. But I think it would be really good. This is a feature that people would like to have. I mean, the fact that you log into the storefront, when you walk away, yeah, I mean, all your credentials, everything's there. If that device is left unlocked, I mean, the screensaver obviously, allows you to secure that. But we'd just like to say, hey, you know what? After 5 minutes, if you've not done anything, we're going to log you off. You got to log back in. Seems like a fair request that we would ask our users to do that. So we can get this other stuff off of here so that we can go in and show people how to set that up during our next session.
Sounds good. So by that, I would say thank you so much for attending this extended tech talk, and see you in a week.
Thank you, everybody. Frederick?
Yep.
We'll see you later, man. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.